From The Punisher 2 being cancelled after a 7-year-long wait, to Universal Pictures not meeting the deadline for the principal production of Hulk 2, here are some of the MCU movies that were cancelled after being announced. Starting with the most tragic case out of them all, Spider-Man 4. Given the iconic reputation that Sam Raimi's trilogy eventually achieved, Spider-Man 4's eventual cancellation is probably the most heartbreaking of all the cancelled Marvel films out there. The attachment to the characters was real, and everybody had been sitting tight in their seats waiting for the next big Raimi hit. But the film simply imploded under the weight of anticipation, and conflicts about which villains should be featured in the fourth Spider-Man film halted the entire production. Before that, Sony had been pushing big names like Jim Carrey as Carnage and Bruce Campbell as Mysterio, while according to them, John Malkovich was going to play Vulture. But Raimi preferred Morbius the Living Vampire or Kurt Connor's Lizard. It seemed that the creator's overthinking is what truly sent this project down the drain, because despite a variety of fascinating villain alternatives, Raimi quit the franchise in 2009, simply because he felt that he was out of options. Leading man Tobey Maguire followed after him, and in the end, screenwriter James Vanderbilt was virtually the only man remaining on the Spider-Man 4 project. But it all worked out eventually, because during the narrative scripting for Spider-Man 4, Vanderbilt was told to write a reboot script, seeing how they had all been preparing for the possibility of Sam Raimi stepping out of the film. In the end, the Spider-Man 4 version of the script eventually became the basis for Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man reboot. But the saddest part of the entire scenario is how Sam Raimi confirmed something years later. Had Spider-Man 4 gone into production, Spider-Man 5 would have been instantly greenlit and begun pre-production. In fact, Sony would have liked to conclude the series after the 6th film, but as you'll see in the next cancelled MCU film, even the Spider-Man villains have had it bad. Venom. Topher Grace's Eddie Brock, whose villainous name was Venom, was first seen in Spider-Man 3, and seeing how brilliantly done his character had been since the very start, he was supposed to get his own, well-deserved spin-off film. Things were so serious that it was actually in the works in 2008, right in the middle of other Spider-Man 3 sequels. By 2009, Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese had finished a script that wasn't just good. It was described as the grittiest, most realistic take on the Spider-Man enemy, which was bound to excite fans all over the world. Shortly after the script's approval, director-producer Gary Ross was engaged to rewrite Venom, as he had done with Spider-Man 4 drafts as well, and had it all worked out, this version would have rendered Venom more of an anti-hero, just like Tom Hardy's Venom films. But then things started to go wrong in late 2009. Topher Grace was considered unlikely to reprise his role as Eddie Brock. In the end, Venom followed in the footsteps of Spider-Man 4, as Raimi exited his own Spider-Man franchise, rendering many of the most exciting ongoing projects impossible to finish. Just imagine the exciting MCU films you would have gotten to see had Raimi stayed in his seat. The sadness is real, but it seems like everything Spider-Man related is eventually destined for doom. Just like The Amazing Spider-Man 3, this film simply never happened, thanks to the excessive confidence that the team had in the franchise. Things truly went wrong when the film's announcement came 11 months prior to The Amazing Spider-Man 2's theatrical debut. But that's not all. They also confirmed a fourth Amazing Spider-Man chapter right there. And if you want to call them overly ambitious, go right ahead. They should have never declared things so early on, because shortly after The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Andrew Garfield openly announced something jarring. He stated that not only did he not want to portray Spider-Man beyond a third film, but he would also not renew his contract with Sony under any condition. Basically, their lead character was resigning from the franchise in front of the entire world. Trust me, it wasn't a good look. The contractual stalemate made Sony obliged to declare in the summer of 2014 their desperate attempt at saving the franchise, which they did by delaying The Amazing Spider-Man 3 by 4 years. But instead of saving anything, the delay killed the entire thing off. Sony scrapped the idea so that they could make space for Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU. What a shame, but delays have cost movies more than you'd think, as you'll see in the next film cancellation I'm going to talk about, Hulk 2. Eric Bana's version of the Hulk emerged in 2003. This was way before Mark Ruffalo's legendary Bruce Banner and even before Edward Norton's appearance as the gamma-loaded Professor. In fact, that was a time when the Hulk got the best imaginable start for a new superhero movie, as it generated a crazy $245 million fortune worldwide. To put it into perspective, this was nearly double its production budget, and this made Hulk 2 a widely anticipated film, of course. It was supposed to follow along with its predecessor, and the release was expected to be somewhere in 2005, but a series of pre-production delays stopped the progress of the film almost entirely, despite the fact that writer James Schamus was working on a spectacular film script with a lethal combo of the Grey Hulk and Abomination. Marvel took over production in 2006 after Universal Pictures failed to reach deadlines for principal production. After that, Marvel announced that they had canceled all production for Hulk 2, as they then planned to take another route down the road with a reboot, but that only led to another failed narrative with The Incredible Hulk, and the Green Giant only found his true home in 2012 when he joined the Avengers. But for the next film, the cancellation meant a fate much worse than Hulk's, The Punisher 2. While Jon Bernthal has mostly been associated with Frank Castle, before the Netflix series' 2017 premiere, 3 unique Punisher versions had already been pushed by different studios. The second one belonged to Jonathan Hensley, in which Thomas Jane took on the role of the vengeful Punisher. It's safe to say that critics loved Jane's Punisher, as they praised his steely portrayal, even though they weren't as enthused by the overall tone and inventiveness of the film as they were with the character. But despite a low box office take, Lionsgate greenlit The Punisher 2, and Hensley and Jane were scheduled to get together and begin filming the sequel as early as 2005. But things didn't really go according to plan. Despite having all of the components in place for the project to become a reality, it was shelved for more than 3 years owing to a lack of suitable script. They had several writers committed to the project, but none of it worked out. And even when Hensley dropped out of the project after 2 years of increasingly stale conversations, it wasn't until 2007 that The Punisher 2 was canceled, with a series reboot published the very next year. But I have yet to talk about the most shocking cancellation within the MCU, Gambit. The absence of this film from Marvel's film lineup shook the fanbase to its very core, because nobody would have expected this one to not work out. Filming for Gambit had already commenced as of February 15, 2019, and this part was the end of a long pre-production process that saw Channing Tatum as Gambit, while Lea Seydoux and Lizzie Kaplan were cast to play the mutant Cardslinger's pals. The film's release date was pushed back 4 times due to scheduling issues for its production crew and cast, and to make matters worse, it all coincided with Disney's sudden acquisition of Fox in 2019. Gambit had only been in production for a month when the entire filming process was halted, and that's when it was revealed that Disney now had the rights to the project. So what they chose to do with it was this: they scrapped the entire project to make room for X-Men in the MCU instead. And that's how you missed out on one massive, brilliant Marvel film. But there you have it. These were some of the most regrettable movie cancellations within the MCU.